Chapter 1, Nathan. Stewart was known for issuing odd assignments, but retrieving a canister from a 52-year-old lab in the ruins of the old world added a new level of mystery. Nathan scoffed, reading through the assignment log on his scanner. Trust Stewart not to give away secrets. Half of the document is redacted. Section 7, Security Clearance Required. Yeah, right. He set his scanner to standby and looked out over the old city of Firmwell. Hey, Steph, how much longer until you put us down? He asked, his eyes trained on the darkened streets below and the glimmer of Guardian plasma as one of the alien dragons lurked around several wrecked vehicles. About 7 clicks, boss, unless you want me to find a Guardian, and I can put us all down. A small chuckle escaped her as the jump jet jolted sharply into a turn. Hold on, Steph shouted as the aircraft began to rapidly climb. An alarm sounded from Nathan's scanner, and as he cleared it, a large, translucent, blue, serpent-looking creature passed below them. Are the masking systems on? Yes, boss, they are, Steph replied as the jump jet returned to level flight. Steph, what the hell? Next time a little more warning would be nice. I'd like to go home in one piece and not hit a Guardian. Do you want to fly this thing, Irvine? Yes. She turned her head and scowled at him. Well, you can't. Irvine, shut your gab, and Steph, eyes front and fly. Nathan wasn't impressed with the comments. The last thing he needed in the dead zone was to be babysitting children. We aren't going to hit a Guardian. We'll be on the ground shortly. We'll find the lab and get what we came here for. You got that? Irvine and Steph both nodded. Nathan looked back out the window as the orange from sunset crept its way up the sides of the city's buildings and reflected off the odd panes of glass that remained. The streets were empty, filled with the dust and echoes of their occupants. Now they were a mess of partially collapsed buildings, vehicle hulls, and the dried vegetation that had reclaimed the city, only to die out as the climate changed. There was no movement in sight, just long shadows accompanied by the silhouette cast by the jump jet. Like a bird, it soared over the streets. Paper and other trash blew around in the small eddies created by the engines as they descended, and the shadow disappeared into the decaying light. It was vital they waited until after dark. Guardians lurked in the light, soaking up the sun, almost invisible. Making contact would mean an excruciatingly painful death. Landing Zone 1 is clear, boss. Want me to put it down? No, not just yet, Steph. Give it a few minutes after sunset. Let the darkness swallow the block, and I'll run the scanner again. Last thing I want is for us to land on one of the Guardians, and the 3 of us end up like Beta Team 3 weeks ago. Call it impatience or carelessness. They had set themselves down believing the area was clear, but instead landed on a Guardian, losing all hands. While the loss of Beta Team and the jump jet was tragic, it left Nathan thankful he had opted not to fly with their pilot because of his impatience and reckless conduct. He was glad Steph had shown up when she did. Good pilots were hard to come by. Irvin pulled his rifle up on aim as the jump jet circled the landing site. Nathan held his scanner up once more and scanned the environment. A small illumination of plasma existed to the west within the last traces of daylight. He was uncertain if it was the sunlight playing with his scanner or smaller Guardians. But as long as the landing didn't draw attention, the mission could continue as planned. Steph completed one final loop of the landing zone and passed over Beta Team's crash site, then eased the aircraft into a hover. How's it look, boss? We good? Nathan eyed the twisted metal and orange remains of the crew after contact with the Guardian. At least they went quickly. Boss, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. We're good. Set her down. I need the engines on immediate notice for start, and before you say anything, I understand leaving the avionics online will run the batteries down, but I don't plan to be here too long, okay? Right, boss. Are you sure? What about the thermals? They may attract unwanted attention. She was right. If there was one thing the Guardians loved, it was a constant source of thermal radiation, a drawing card, making it difficult for humans to traverse around in vehicles. Once spotted, it was almost impossible to lose a Guardian in a vehicle without shooting at it. One simply couldn't be shot with a normal weapon. It required a plasma tip or other high-end energy weapon, and in a dire situation, the EMP from a small thermonuclear device. Regardless, they needed to move and move fast. That meant the engines of the jump jet needed to be primed and ready for immediate start. The wheels had barely touched the ground before Steph shut the engines off. Irvin had already jumped clear and was scanning the streets to the west, making sure the threat hadn't closed in on them, as was routine for any aerial insertion. As the landing zone fell quiet, the uncanny dusk blanketed the city. "It's clear, boss," said Irvine, dropping his scanner and returning to the jump jet, taking his pack. Steph tossed her helmet down in the pilot's seat, climbing around the cabin, and stepped out into the ghostly cityscape. It's hard to imagine what this place sounded or even looked like before the Guardians. There aren't even the sounds of insects anymore. It was eerily quiet, apart from the systems in the jump jet cooling and the wind passing through the streets among the destroyed vehicles. Rubble and orange stains of dried remains of those who had once lived in the city. Nathan stepped out of the aircraft onto the street and heard the crunching of fragmented glass beneath his feet. He let out a sigh and breathed in the stale city air. For somewhere that didn't rain all too much, there was a distinct scent of mildew that always hung around streets like this. He powered on his rifle and squinted because of the brightness, then quickly set it to low. He watched as Steph and Irvine did the same, Irvine smacking the screen with his palm, attempting to clear a fault with force. The screen flickered, then dimmed, and he looked up with a grin at Nathan. "Okay, we need to head 2 blocks to the north and turn left. I haven't seen anything else on the scanner since we flew over, but the Guardians are out there." "Yo, boss, do these things look like the big one from before at night? I've only ever been needed for day missions, and those were only ever against the reclamation forces, never Guardians." Steph looked at Irvine and screwed her face up. Her expression appeared to ask, "What are you, stupid?" "Irvine, how many times have you seen a Guardian up close?" Nathan asked. "Just the one time, and it wasn't a good look. I know the big ones look like those Chinese dragon things, like the one before and that statue Stewart has in his office. But I've been told they are different at night. Well, the little ones anyway." "Irvine," Steph cackled, "how could you not know this stuff? I was a delivery driver, then drove a desk for a number of years, okay? I never got outside the walls of the city much, and the one time I did is because they needed someone to drive. You know what it's like. They don't tell us what happens outside the shields." Steph sighed. "Yeah, they look different at night because you can actually see them. They look similar to the big one we saw before, but closer to the statue in Stewart's office. They are animalistic and move like the predators in history books. Sort of like a cat, but still with that dragon-like appearance. They look somewhat majestic at night since they are translucent and are glowing and hot. You don't want to touch them, but you should have no problem seeing them. Just don't let your curiosity distract you from them. You get stuck in a trance, and before you know it, they are on you." Steph made the final pre-start adjustments to the jet's engines. Nathan nodded, turning to Irvin. "Also, don't shoot unless you have to. You fire one plasma round, and although it will take a few out, it's like putting up a big flag that says, 'We're here.'" Nathan knew Irvin hadn't seen a lot of combat experience, but he thought at least some of it had been with the Guardians. Not the Reclamation, a rogue state that seeded from HU over differing opinions on how to remove the Guardians from Earth. As long as he didn't do anything stupid, this wouldn't be a problem. Nathan took point as the trio hugged the edges of the buildings within the first block. Remnants of old-world battles littered the streets. The city hadn't been touched since the day it was attacked. Shell casings still lay scattered on the pavement. Cars' doors were still open, keys in their ignitions. Even the odd skeleton, clothes still on their backs, lay in the open on the street. It was clear which buildings had been attacked, some still having visible scorch marks around the doorways or melted glass from the extreme heat of a Guardian. "I've never seen it this bad," Steph said. Nathan silently agreed, though he had read her file and knew she had been through the fallout of New Doran. 52 years had passed since Firmwell was obliterated in one night. The city was from a time before the employment of large-scale plasma shields. They were used to protect modern cities from the Guardians and ion storms. Nobody in the city stood a chance, and it looks like nobody's been here since. "Is that why we're here?" Irvin asked. "I don't know. Above my pay grade. I just follow orders, but it's important enough to send a second team in, and you know that doesn't happen often. Beta teams stuff this job up, Stewart wants us to check an old lab for some science experiment that was lost. It's probably for a new super weapon or shield we can use against the Guardians. Just nobody's been able to get to it until now. They probably lost its location. It's been a long time after all. Nathan raised his scanner and scanned the next block. Something appeared, but it wasn't plasma-based and definitely alive. Steph looked at Nathan's scanner. Cat? Yeah, probably. Looks like everything isn't dead. This was odd. Animals in the dead zone. Unless they came from the lab, Nathan pondered, lowering his scanner. Irvin, take point. One more block to go, and we are there. Irvine walked forwards, raising his weapon. I'm getting a really uneasy feeling about this place, boss. He wasn't the only one. The howl of the winds through the abandoned alleyways added to the emptiness of the city. It was more than clear the place was dead, and cats or other small animals in the area were an oddity, in fact unheard of. Nothing should be alive in the dead zone, but it wasn't impossible for something to be here, and this led Nathan to wonder, what was in that lab? He chose to ignore the thoughts for the moment. After all, life forms in the area meant there weren't guardians, and that was a good thing. So, where's the lab, boss? Steph asked. Next block, in the back of a dry cleaner's. Irvine stopped and turned back to face the two. That's a little cliché, isn't it, boss? I mean, a lot of those old movies always had things in a laundry or dry cleaners, didn't they? Looks like the cliché was a thing. Nathan chuckled and shrugged. He remembered watching old films during his days at the academy, shows remastered from the time before the Guardians. The thought of those visions of a normal life reminded him why he joined the service, and that sobered his thoughts. Does it matter? He said in a stern tone, refocusing his mind on their objective. Well, only if there was an explosion at the dry cleaners. Irvin turned back around to face the street. Nathan cocked an eye at him. An explosion? Why would there be an explosion? You know, all the casualties. Irvine grinned. Steph groaned loudly. Shut up. That isn't funny. The dry cleaner was there, plain as day, one of the only buildings still standing in the center of the block. Casualties, as Irvine put it, still hung from racks, and even the hanging bell chimed as they pushed the door open. Apart from a little UV damage, the room looked untouched and smelled like a hospital filled with mothballs. Nathan looked at the old bell on the counter. Irvin, pass me the jumper wires from your pack. Okay, but why, boss? If we do that, will I still be able to use the gun? I mean, it will go flat, right? He fumbled around through his bag in the dark, then passed the wires to Nathan. If you can think of a better way to turn the power on, I'm all ears. Steph, light please. Irvine, once you're done, check the scanner again. In the light of Steph's torch, Nathan plugged the cable into the battery on his rifle. Then, moving the bell on the counter, he found a small outlet. Okay, Irvine, once we activate the power, we'll only have a few minutes until the Guardians are on us. We get in, get the canister, and get out. Tell me if anything appears on the scanner. Yes, boss. Irvin peered down at the gadget strapped to him, like a four-arm guard from the Middle Ages, except way more advanced than all previous smart devices and used for identification and communication. The holographic touchscreen lit up with the military-enhanced thermal scoping tool, revealing movement in the street. Nathan plugged the cable into the socket, set the power supply to his plasma rifle to auxiliary, and pulled the trigger. The light of an old fluorescent lamp flickered on and off at the back of the room, and a dim hum of electronics receiving power for the first time in years sounded. Well, there goes any stealth cover we had, Steph said, rolling her eyes. Our cover was always going to be blown the moment I powered on the building, Steph. Come, let's open the lab and get the canister. How? Didn't we do that with the jet? She asked. Nathan smirked. Nope. If the big one from before didn't follow us, we didn't do anything with the jet. Why do you think we landed where we did? No junkers and no guardians around. Even if the jet could attract a guardian, you know as well as I do, the lights in these old buildings are like magnets to anyone or anything. Bugs, junkers, guardians, all the same. Now please move the bell to the end of the counter on top of the gray pad, then ring it. She looked at him like he was an idiot, and he thought about it. It sounded a little too strange. Then again, the intel from Stewart's department always offered these really odd, quirky ways of getting into places. It was probably the reason it had taken them so long to find this place. Anything on the scanner, Irvine? I got something. Probably just the cats moving. The cats moving? Nathan turned and looked at Irvine's screen. Two carbon-based life forms appeared on the scanner, small but moving with haste along the street a block away. Then one of the objects pulsed through the scanner's speaker. Shit! Kill the light. Those aren't cats. Reclamation. Reclamation? Steph asked as she scrabbled along the wall, her hands desperately in search of the lamp switch. How do you know? What are they doing here? I got a pulse off one of their scanners. The mission briefing stated there was intel they were looking for this place too. Probably why Stewart sent us out so soon again. They had to have known something after what happened to Beta Team. Nathan couldn't withdraw power, or they would never open the lab. He thought quickly and spotted a broom in the corner. Smash the lamp. I'll get the lab open. Don't use your energy weapons, or we will have a guardian on us in an instant. And hold your fire until the last possible moment. You won't appear on their scanners. Sweat beaded on Nathan's forehead as he jumped the counter and slid the bell to the far end. Once the bell had been rung, a small door opened beneath the counter, displaying an exposed keypad. With the code supplied by Stewart, a dim light shone from behind a rug hanging on the wall. He pulled it free and uncovered the lab's entrance. Once Stewart's code was entered into the punch pad on the door's handle, it opened. The scent of stale air wafted out from within the lab, and an ominous cloud rolled across the floor. The sound of glass breaking echoed in the small space when Steph smashed the last lamp, and the room fell dark. No energy weapons. Last thing we need is a guardian right now, Nathan whispered. Boss, I left my sidearm in the jump jet, Irvine admitted sheepishly. Nathan looked at Steph. And you? Same, boss. Shit. Okay. Don't use the weapons unless you have to. Leave. Head for the jump jet and wait for me. If you need to dust off, do it, and I'll mark my location with an IR strobe. Both Steph and Irvin nodded and disappeared into the shadows. He would deal with their carelessness later, during the debriefing. While their failure was not acceptable, he couldn't blame them. They hadn't really expected to be fighting humans, just guardians. Nathan pushed through the opening into the lab, propping the door ajar with a brick. If it locked, he'd be trapped, and although safe, he'd probably suffocate. The reality was all too realized when he used the scanner's night vision and a body appeared in the darkness. Woman, mid to late 30s, lab coat, blue jeans, and glasses. Debbie Waters was written on her name tag. Her body was almost perfectly preserved, although dry like jerky. In her arm lay a battery-like canister labeled biohazard, and in the other hand a diary and a cookie. That must be it, Nathan thought. He reached down to pry the canister from her arms and placed his hand on the top, then attempted to pry it from her body. He felt a surge of extreme heat through his hand and released the canister back into Debbie's arms. He could smell his singed skin stuck to what looked like electrodes on the canister and cursed at his stupidity. He checked his scanner quickly and watched as it pulsed once more off the contact. He had to move quickly, so he removed his pack, placed it over the top of the canister, and pulled it free from Debbie's arm. He closed the bag up, then looked back up at her body and the green leather-bound book. With a thought of remorse, Nathan removed it from her hand, placing it into his jacket pocket. The cookie disintegrated with his touch. That's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, he thought. It wasn't normal to take personal things like this on a recovery mission, and Stewart had made no mention other than the canister. Nathan didn't think anything of it more than he just wanted to know about the last days of Debbie's life, and if there was anything more worth knowing. With the diary safe, he withdrew his sidearm and snuck toward the door. His scanner pulsed rapidly because of the reclamation soldier, now within the building. Nathan stood adjacent the lab door. The slow, almost silent scrapes of shoes across the floor were the only sounds he could hear. He stayed quiet and held his sidearm up on aim. A head poked around the corner, and Nathan pushed the barrel of his pistol hard against the temple of a young woman. "Don't move!" The woman dropped her torch and slowly raised her hands. The light rolled to the side and shone through the space from behind her, outlining a silhouette of a slender but curvaceous woman with long hair. "I need you to give me the canister," the woman whimpered in a frightened tone. Was this really a reclamation soldier? Something wasn't right. Irvin's scanner had pulsed one, yet she didn't have a uniform on, and from what he understood, the reclamation were a shoot first, ask questions later type of mob. Who are you? What are you doing here? The woman breathed heavily. I'm here to stop you from getting that canister. I'm someone trying to save the world. Well, that's why I'm here too. She shook her head. No, you will kill all of us. What was this nonsense the woman spoke? Nathan knew one thing. Whatever was in the canister was key to removing the Guardians from Earth. This woman was wrong. She had to be. The Reclamation were all about greed and wealth. They chose to split from the collective government of humanity united, targeting research centers and the civilians who worked in them. The Reclamation were nothing more than terrorists. Who are you? Nathan barked, giving her head a nudge with the gun. For fuck's sake, don't shoot me, she yelled. Her tears glistened in the dim light bouncing off her cheeks as her hands slowly lowered. Keep your hands where I can see them. What is your name? And what do you need the canister for? He wasn't going to give it to her, but the query was worth the intel. Jade, my name's Jade. We need the canister to save the world. The shot from a plasma weapon illuminated the room. Within moments, Nathan's scanner lit up, the plasma warning alarming out. Shit, who the hell let that off, Nathan thought, staring at the girl. Please, give me that canister, she said. I can't do that. Boss, I fucked up. We gotta go. Irvin's voice broke in over the scanner as the sounds of energy shots echoed through the building. Shit. Okay, here's what we are going to do. You are going to throw your sidearm against the wall. Then we are both going to walk out of here, and you are going to turn left and run up the street, or we're both dead, he said, still holding his gun to her temple. She did nothing but stare into blank space as the sound of Nathan's scanner grew louder. Fucking do it, he yelled, pressing the gun hard into her head. Okay, she yelled, tears running down her face. Her right hand moved from view and tossed her sidearm across the room. It crashed against the tiles in the corner. Nathan began to walk forwards, forcing the girl back with every step. As he passed the door, he kicked the brick free, and the door closed behind him, sealing Dr. Waters in her tomb. He grabbed the battery pack for his rifle and fed it into his pocket, then stopped in full view of the street. Right, go and don't try anything, or I will put a bullet in you. Nathan's scanner pulsed again. This time the alarm was different. The proximity warning. This meant a large Guardian was close. He glanced at the scanner, then back up towards Jade, now already the length of a basketball court away from him. With any luck, the Guardian won't spot her. Saving the world? The Reclamation don't care about saving the world, he thought, as he started to run in the opposite direction, back towards the jump jet. Within moments of leaving the dry cleaners, the building exploded into a fireball. Out of the ash and embers drifted the Guardian as large as a mid-sized 21st century passenger aircraft and glowing like a neon sign. Its head resembled that of the ancient Chinese dragons, and lightning flicked around its body. Nathan didn't have time to look. It would see him, and that would be it. He couldn't stop and hoped Steph had had the forethought to spool up their transport. Rounding the last corner, he heard the Guardian lift off, becoming airborne once more and darting overhead. As it did, the old lights in the buildings momentarily lit up before fading back to darkness. Glad you could join us, boss, Irvine stated, extending his arm out towards Nathan. So what did the Reclamation want? The same thing we did. But what did she mean by save the world? The question played in Nathan's mind, but it would have to wait until after he reported to Stewart and handed the canister over. Perhaps Dr. Waters' diary would answer some questions.